This is a work of fiction created for the purpose of moral reflection and entertainment. Any resemblance to real people or events is purely coincidental. Have you ever wondered what a person would do if they discovered that family love depends on an inheritance? In this moving story, you'll witness choices that reveal the true value of loyalty, forgiveness, and legacy. Stay until the end. The lesson may change the way you see life. The grandfather clock marked long steps inside La Brume. Arthur Delmont raised his glass as if weighing his own existence. The crystal touched his lips and returned a tired reflection of the old man. 78 years echoed in his throat like an old wine. The toast was to truth, not to life that was fading away. The doctor's letter lay open, like a cold blade. Measured words announced the sentence with cruel politeness. "Months," said the diagnosis, writing a short future. Arthur read it again, as if he could change the ink. It hasn't changed. It has simply strengthened the hand of the man who decides. He walked down the hall, touching paintings full of shadows. Each frame contained smiles that were priced high, memories of dinners where the topic was percentage and power. Love was an empty chair that no one tried to fill. The echo of that absence was more painful than the illness. In the office, the safe, whispered secrets of steel and paper. Arthur took out tapes, letters, and a gilt-sized recorder. He stacked instructions like someone assembling a getaway boat. Each clue would say more about those involved than about him. He wanted to know who would be left without a promise of reward. Thomas Reed entered at dusk, sober and loyal. Old friends who have discussed ethics and wills. Arthur handed him a sealed envelope and a firm look. "Read only when the sea returns my absence." Thomas understood more than Arthur dared say. The plan was born like a silent, stubborn tide, a boat, unidentified remains, the complicit mist. The world would see a name that is erased from the port. Meanwhile, Arthur would just be strategically silent. From afar, I would observe who was crying and who was counting figures. He wrote the first note to Clara, his granddaughter. Simple words like the afternoons they shared tea. He asked for forgiveness without confessing the future gesture. He left a phrase that was both a compass and a thorn. Love is not measured by inheritances, but by steps. In the hall, an old portrait weighed more than the wall. Arthur was young, promising, the world in his pocket. He looked at his own past and felt a clear tiredness. Riches cannot buy hands that warm in the night. They buy audiences, and audiences applaud even farewells. With the night came the decision that admits no return. He signed papers that looked like maps of a shipwreck, separated keys, changed names, memorized shortcuts. Courage was the last piece put in the pocket, and fear, the first companion of exile. Before leaving, he crossed the garden that smelled of the sea. A breeze stirred the curtains like a farewell. Arthur knocked on the door as if sealing an ancient pact. "May my absence say what my presence did not say." And he left, carrying the question that would make everyone reflect. The day dawned pale, stitched together by light mists. Fishermen saw the little boat, silent as a secret. The hull hit the water with a discreet gilt. There was inaccurate marks that raised suspicions. No one had been found as a censored word. When the police arrived, the beach held its breath. Photographs, yellow tapes, cold protocol voices. La Brume was invaded by footsteps that did not ask permission. Henry Delmont arrived, calculating the price of silence. Clara arrived, crying names that only she knew. The news entered homes like a rain of steel. Tycoon disappears under mysterious circumstances. The city whispered theories at coffee tables. Heirs, lovers, debts, a reckless plan. The fog provided every possible version. In the main hall, Arthur's portrait watched. Henry paced in circles, fabricating indignation. He spoke of inventories as if praying in Latin. His pain was accounting, with columns and totals. Clara pressed a photo and asked for news. Elise, the housekeeper, moved like a shadow. He knew Labrum's steps, closets, and absences. His eyes bore the weariness of decades of service. He saw the glasses out of place and understood the ritual, but he kept his understanding like someone who keeps ammunition. Thomas Reed arrived sober with the gravity of the law. He announced that the will was not in the safe. "Missing," he said, and the words sounded deliberate. Eyes met like tempered blades. Henry demanded answers. Clara begged for clues. The police catalogued the traces and found a fiber. Fabrics tell truths when the voice fails. A clock stopped at 3:13 was noted. Timed is almost an encrypted confession. The sea, however, swallowed the scene, as it always does. Condolences arrived, fragile as paper flowers. The mansion was filled with hugs that didn't warm. Distant cousins emerged with convenient memories. Each one already measured the inheritance with the eyes of a goldsmith. Clara isolated herself in her room, listening to the sea crash. Late in the afternoon, Thomas asked everyone to leave. There are procedures, there are deadlines, there are investigations. The words built a fence around the pain. Henry mumbled figures. Lawyers spoke softly. Clara stayed, feeling that the story was wrong. As night fell, Labrum sounded larger and emptier. The wind walked through the corridors like a messenger. Clara opened the office and touched her grandfather's desk. He felt in the wood the pulse of a promise, and he decided that he would seek answers with his own steps. The Labrum mansion was dressed in black and expensive perfume. The wake seemed more like an exhibition of appearances. Men in suits and grieving women spoke in figures. The tears, when they fell, tasted of convenience. Arthur, absent, observed everything only through the memory of the walls. Clara remained seated in front of her grandfather's portrait. The painting seemed to return her a still, living, silent gaze. She remembered afternoon tea and childhood stories. The others murmured about inheritances and percentages. She just murmured his name, as if he heard. Henry, cold-faced, took the center of the room. He distributed instructions, already behaving like an heir. He talked about lawyers, deeds, and bank accounts. He drew attention like someone taking over an empty throne. But in his eyes, there was control that hid insecurity. Thomas Reed, discreet, kept a neutral expression. He knew more than he let on to the curious. He kept the secret like someone carrying dynamite in his pocket. When Henry pressed him about the will, he smiled dryly. Mr. Delmont always believed in the patience of the tides. Elise, the housekeeper, served coffee and watched silently. The years have taught him that grief reveals naked truths. He noticed the rush in Henry's eyes and the emptiness in his gestures. I knew Arthur didn't completely trust anyone, but he also knew that his plan carried risks. At night, the rain scratched the windows like restless fingers. Clara went up to her grandfather's room, ignoring the prohibitions. The wood of the floor groaned under her light footsteps. On the desk, he found a sealed envelope. On the back, in shaky handwriting, "For those who still believe." Her heart raced. Her breathing turned to prayer. He tore the seal with hands trembling with hope. Inside was a single sentence written in blue ink. "Love is not proven with words, but with steps," and a small, old, oxidized bronze key. Clara knew that something greater than mourning was beginning there. He kept the key close to his chest like a secret vow. Outside, the sea roared loudly like an accomplice. The house seemed alive, watching her every breath, and the fog demanded promises that were yet to be made. Meanwhile, Henry retreated to the main hall. The sound of glasses mingled with the rain and suspicions. "If he wanted to test me, let him see what he missed," he muttered. But the old man didn't hear. Or perhaps he heard from somewhere else. For somewhere on the coast, Arthur Delmont was watching. Dawn brought silence, and secrets barely swept away. The police returned to the mansion with new reports. No people found, no certainties, just traces of a story that didn't fit, and an absent will that inflamed ambitions. Thomas Reed gathered his family in the main hall. He placed an empty leather briefcase on the table. "Mr. Delmont's will is not in my possession." Henry reacted with fury, Clara with bewilderment. Elise just lowered her eyes as if she had already expected it. "What do you mean by that?" Henry raised his voice. Thomas remained calm as someone who had dealt with wild beasts. He withdrew the document 3 days ago before the trip. "What for?" Henry insisted, restrained. He said he wanted to review the fate of his own legacy. The news fell like a thunder of gold and poison. Each heir did the math in silence. Clara, however, felt that it was a message. Grandfather did not disappear in despair, but on purpose. The will was part of a game, and a goodbye. That afternoon, Clara returned to the office alone. The light streamed through the window in sad, golden beams. He leafed through books, opened drawers, moved heavy furniture, until I found a small crack in the floor. There, a wooden box had been resting for decades. Inside, more letters, a recording tape and another key. On the lid, an inscription in French, "Pour l'amour véritable." Clara felt tears well up, not from pain, but from revelation. Grandfather had left a path, not a fortune, and she promised to follow him, no matter what the cost. Meanwhile, Henry was talking on the phone in a low voice. Hired professionals, bills, veiled pressure. "If he's alive, I'll find him." Greed had become his compass. Mourning, just a convenient pretext. That night, Clara heard footsteps in the hallway. He left the room and found Elise in the half-light. The housekeeper held a candle and had an ambiguous look. "Girl, certain truths hurt more than absence." But Clara replied firmly, "I prefer pain to lies." Outside, the sea wind roared against the stained glass windows. It was as if the sea itself encouraged her to continue. The old key jingled in his coat pocket, and within her was born the certainty that he was alive. Arthur Delmont had not left. He had only hidden away to love. The morning arrived shrouded in a fog that seemed to hold secrets. Clara sat at the desk, looking at the 2 keys side by side. Both were old, heavy, and exuded the metallic smell of the past. The letters stacked before her seemed to pulse like locked hearts. Each envelope bore the Delmont family crest and a number in red. She opened the first one, her fingers trembling with hope and fear. Grandfather's words sounded like a whisper coming from the walls. "Clara, if you are reading this, it is because love has resisted doubt." He described places from his childhood, the old lighthouse, his mother's studio, places that held fragments of memories and subtle clues. Clara felt her childhood revive like a forgotten perfume. He remembered the lighthouse and the afternoons when Arthur taught him to look at the horizon. "Everything you look for, girl, the sea has already given you back one day," he said. Now those words seemed like a riddle in the form of tenderness, and the lighthouse became the first destination of his search. Meanwhile, Henry watched from afar, spying on every move. The hard face, the unshaven beard, the eyes full of distrust. "She knows something," he murmured with studied coldness. He ordered a detective to follow her discreetly, but what he was looking for was more dangerous than he imagined. At the lighthouse, Clara found the second envelope, hidden under a rock. Inside, an old photo, her as a child, on her grandfather's lap, both smiling. Behind the photo, another message, "Whoever understands love understands the secret," and a handwritten coordinate pointing to a distant village. Her heart beat like a stormy sea, steady but unpredictable. Back at the mansion, Clara noticed subtle changes in the environment. Doors slightly open, drawers rummaged through, night footsteps. Elise pretended not to notice, but the tension was already present in the corridors. Thomas Reed, for his part, began to worry about the way things were going. He knew Arthur wanted to test love, but he feared the test would turn into tragedy. That night, Clara locked the letters inside a box. He prayed silently, asking for strength and protection. He dreamed of his grandfather calling his name, surrounded by light and wind. When he woke up, he felt it wasn't a dream, it was a calling, and she decided to leave before fear found her. Outside, the mist enveloped La Brume like a farewell veil. Every stone on the path seemed to retain the echo of grandfather's footsteps. Clara got into the car and left without looking back. The lighthouse was in the distance, but Arthur's voice was still alive in it. The journey had begun, and love would be its compass. The village seemed forgotten on the map, hidden between hills and tides. Small houses, wooden balconies, and silent old fishermen. The air smelled of salt and stories no one told anymore. Clara got out of the car and felt the wind blow her name. There, everything seemed suspended between the real and the intangible. In a small inn, he rented a simple room. The stone walls kept out the cold of the early morning sea. At the counter, a lady with deep eyes offered him tea. "Looking for someone?" he asked with an almost predictive smile. "Yes, my grandfather, Arthur Delmont." The woman hesitated for a moment, as if recognizing a forbidden name. Then he simply said, "The winds know this man," and he pointed to a hill where a hut stood alone. Clara thanked her, feeling her heart race uncontrollably. It was as if fate was blowing at her back, pushing her forward. As I walked up the stone path, the sky turned grey. The waves crashed against the rocks like applause from an invisible audience. She stopped in front of the cabin, doors locked, windows covered. But through the crack, he saw a flickering light. Someone was there. He called his grandfather's name, and the wind responded first. On the other side of the village, Arthur walked along the beach at dusk. He wore another name, another face aged by freedom. He watched the sea as if he were talking to time. He had a diary in his hands and wrote every day, "Today love still seeks me. I hope I deserve to be found." He knew Clara had come. He had heard it from the murmurs of the village. But fear kept him away. Fear of seeing the disappointment in her eyes. He feared being misunderstood for having made her suffer through a severe test. And yet he longed to hear her calling his name one more time. Because love, for Arthur, was the only treasure worth trying. At night, Clara returned to the inn with her heart in turmoil. He didn't sleep. He just wrote a letter that would never be sent. "If he's alive, come find me. I don't want the gold. I want Grandpa." He folded the paper and placed it under the window like an invitation. The wind carried it away as if it understood what was written. The next morning, Arthur found the note on the beach. He read in silence, tears mixing with the salt in the air. The handwriting was unmistakable, vivid, tender, insistent. He smiled, and for the first time in years, he felt loved without fear. He knew the game was up. It was time to be found. The sun rose lazily over Villa dos Ventos, gilding the ancient rooftops. Clara walked along the beach, her feet sinking into the cold morning sand. It brought with it the feeling that something was about to change. On the horizon, the sea seemed to hide answers beneath each wave, and it was there that he saw it, a glass bottle brought in by the tide. Inside it was a folded piece of paper and a faded blue ribbon. Clara opened it carefully, dreading and longing for what was to come, and there it was, Arthur's handwriting, steady, elegant, unmistakable. Love doesn't disappear, it just changes address. Below the phrase, a coordinate and a family symbol, the Delmont family crest. Clara's heart raced, as if her grandfather had just spoken to her. She knelt down, looking at the sea with tears and a smile of disbelief. "I knew you weren't there," she murmured between sobs. Her faith was transformed into living certainty, like a flame in the wind. He decided to follow the coordinates without telling anyone, not even Thomas. But news of the find did not remain silent for long. A fisherman who had seen it on the beach told Henry about the bottle. Within a few hours, the older brother was already in the car, in a contained fury. "If he is alive, he will listen to me." Ambition had now become an almost feverish obsession. Meanwhile, Arthur watched everything from afar, from the window of his cabin. He recognized Clara from a distance, her posture, her way of walking, her courage. The old heart was torn between regret and tenderness. "She really came," he whispered, touching the window glass. But in the background he saw another car approaching, a dark omen. That night Clara found a small shed indicated by the letter. Inside was a record player and a single piece of media marked AD. She put it on, and her grandfather's voice filled the space like a ghost. "If you are listening to this, it is because love has conquered fear. But be careful, my dear. There are those who love only gold." The sound stopped with a brief thud, and Clara realized she was not alone. Outside, footsteps trod the sand, slow and heavy. She turned off the flashlight and held her breath. Through the window, he saw a silhouette, tall, rigid, familiar. Henry had arrived, and the game would finally change tone. As Clara followed the beach path, Elise watched from afar. The housekeeper, now in a hotel, was tense. In his hands, the bundle of letters that Arthur had left secretly in the mansion. Papers with signs of handling, broken seals, questionable choices. The promised money spoke louder than any memory. "You did the right thing, Elise," Henry said into the phone. His voice was cold, calculated. "These letters will lead me straight to him." Elise tried to respond, but something in her chest felt heavy. "He trusted me, Henry," he murmured without conviction. On the other side, a short laugh. "I trusted too much. Now it's our turn." The call ended, leaving Elise alone with the sound of the wind. The pages in her hands seemed to burn like living guilt. Every word Arthur said echoed memories he'd rather forget. Meanwhile, Clara found refuge in the house of an old fisherman. The man, with a tired look, recognized the name Delmont and fell silent. "He came by here weeks ago," he confessed after hesitating. "He spoke little, wrote a lot. He seemed to be waiting for someone." Clara's heart filled with hope and urgency. Across the coast, Henry followed the clues in Elise's letters. Each paragraph revealed fragments of Arthur's plan, but what he didn't know was that the old man had set traps. False clues, switched addresses, intentional riddles. Arthur knew ambition well and used it as bait. Elise, tormented, began to doubt her own choice. The money he had received now seemed like a burden, not a prize. In dreams, I saw Arthur's face saying, "Loyalty is the gold of the soul." She woke up sweating, fearing that Clara would discover her mistake. But deep down, I knew it was too late. Clara, in turn, found a new letter inside an empty bottle. "The truth is, where the wind changes direction," it read. Along with it, a photo of Arthur on the hill of Vila dos Ventos, smiling. She recognized the place and felt that the reunion was near, but she also felt the invisible weight of eyes watching her. Elise tried to call Clara that night, but hesitated when she heard her voice. "Clara, I need to tell you something." "About what, Elise?" the young woman asked apprehensively. On the other side, silence. Just breathing and regret. "Sorry, girl. The wind took me too late." And he hung up. Meanwhile, Henry parked in front of the cabin on the hill. The lighthouse blinked like a watchful eye, illuminating the inevitable. Inside, Arthur heard the sound of the engine and understood his destination. He picked up the old tape recorder, turned it on and murmured, "The time has come to see who still knows how to love." The rain fell all night, scratching the rooftops like impatient fingers. Inside the cabin, Arthur remained motionless, his gaze lost out the window. The recorder ran, capturing short breaths. He knew Henry was near. He could smell haste and competition in the air, and he also knew that Clara would soon find him. Meanwhile, Clara searched the old La Brume mansion for new clues. The house seemed to talk to her through clicks and sighs. In one of the corridors, he noticed a slightly crooked portrait on the wall. It was a portrait of Arthur, young, in a white suit and with a discreet smile. But behind him the paper was torn and something was glistening beneath the frame. Carefully, Clara removed the painting and found a yellowed envelope. Inside was a hand-drawn map and a key identical to the previous ones. In the corner of the paper, a sentence in French. Le cœur connaît la route. The heart knows the way, she translated softly. The map pointed again to the hill of Villa dos Ventos. Thomas Reed, upon discovering that Clara had left, was alarmed. He knew Henry was following the same trail and that the encounter called for caution. "Arthur, what have you done?" he murmured, remembering the pact between the two. Unanswered calls, unanswered addresses, a foreboding silence. Something decisive was about to happen. Elise, overcome with guilt, decided to act courageously. He got in the car and drove in the rain towards Villa dos Ventos. "I can't let the dispute close the cycle," she told herself. Tears mingled with the storm on the glass. She knew it might be too late, but she would try. Clara, guided by the map, reached the top of the hill in the early morning. The fog was thick, like wet cotton. Amidst the sound of the wind and waves, she saw a light flickering in the distance. He recognized the cabin and the old lantern on the porch. Each step sounded like a heartbeat. As he approached, he heard voices inside the house. One of them was firm, bitter. Henry. The other was weak, but full of dignity. Arthur. "You don't understand, my son. Love is the only testament I leave." "Love doesn't pay the bills, Dad," Henry replied, his voice tense. Clara ran to the door, but hesitated when she heard the sound of an object falling. The recorder spun on the table, capturing everything. Arthur was breathing heavily, his voice breaking. Henry raised his tone, trapped in his own demands. And then a silence, deep and thick. She pushed the door open, the wind rushing into the room as a witness. Arthur sat, pale, with one hand on his chest. Henry, standing, looked at his father as if time had stopped. He staged the whole thing, Clara, and now, he stammered, but her gaze sought only her grandfather. Arthur looked at her with tenderness and regret. "My girl, you came." Clara knelt beside him, holding his hand. The tears flowed silently, as if the world respected the goodbye. "Now I know who loved me, and who was just waiting for the end." The dawn was still breathing when Arthur, exhausted, had his last moments with serenity. Clara's face was the memory he finally kept. "You were the only good thing left in everything I built," he whispered. She tried to support him, but he just stilled his expression. "Don't cry, my love. The truth always comes with the wind." Henry, stunned, tried to understand what he had done. The recorder continued to run, recording his disjointed speech. "Dad, I didn't want to. I just wanted what was mine." Arthur looked away, tired, but in serene peace. "Love was never possession, Henry. It was borrowed." Clara held her grandfather's body, asking for help between sobs. Elise arrived at the door, soaking wet, taking in the scene. He called out to Arthur, but the echo answered. The old man had departed, leaving the most human will of all. A silence of gratitude and loss filled the small cabin. Thomas Reed arrived minutes later, guided by a dark intuition. He saw the recording, understood the situation, and called the authorities. Henry was taken away without resistance, his hands trembling, his eyes blank. The recorder would support the necessary investigation and accountability, but would also record the truth. Arthur, to the end, controlled fate with stern wisdom. In the following days, Clara took care of the goodbye in silence. No luxury, no press, just the sea as witness. She gave her grandfather's ashes to the waves as he had requested. The wind blew hard, taking with it what was left of regret. And on the horizon, she swore she saw one last silhouette smile. Elise left the village without saying goodbye, carrying the guilt on her shoulders. In his hands, there remained only a letter that he would never deliver. "Arthur, "Forgive me for doubting your heart." He put the paper inside a book and disappeared from the map. Lost loyalty weighed more than any gold received. Clara officially inherited Arthur's name and assets. But instead of luxury, he chose humility and purpose. He turned the Labroum mansion into a shelter for elderly people without families. "For those who love without being remembered," said the sign at the entrance. And every night, he would turn on a light in his grandfather's office. One morning, when he opened one of the drawers, he found a new letter. The envelope bore the same coat of arms, but the handwriting was different. "If you still believe in love, follow the waves," the text said. And along with it, a small old compass marking north. Clara smiled. Love, after all, doesn't disappear. It just changes address. The morning after the goodbye brought a strange calm to Vila dos Ventos. The sea, which had previously roared, now seemed at peace. Clara, sitting before her grandfather's simple tomb, read his letters again. Every word felt more alive than ever, as if he were still guiding her. But something in his heart told him the story wasn't over yet. Thomas Reed arrived with a leather briefcase under his arm. "The original will has been found," he announced in a firm voice. Clara looked at him in surprise. "Arthur left it with me, but only part of it. The rest is hidden." "Why?" "Because he wanted love to complete the rest," Thomas explained. Inside the folder there was only half a document. The other part was torn with a note. "The second half belongs to those who seek not gold, but memories." Clara understood that the answer lay in some gesture of the heart. Meanwhile, Henry awaited his trial in icy silence. The newspapers called him the cursed heir. But what no one saw was the look of a broken man. He hated the past, but he hated himself even more. Everything he had touched had turned to ash, including the affection he had rejected. Elise, hidden in a convent in the hills, wrote a confession. He revealed that he had helped Arthur with the plan, but had become corrupted along the way. "He believed in love more than any other good," he wrote, "and I failed. But I saw with my own eyes what it is to be truly loved." The envelope was sent to Clara, along with the second half of the will. When Clara put the two parts together, she realized that it was no ordinary will. It was a long letter, almost a poetic confession. Arthur described his regrets, his failures, and his lessons learned. "Everything I own belongs to the one who proves that love survives absence." And at the end, a delicately written name, Clara Delmont. Clara cried, but her crying was light, as if washing away centuries of pain. He understood that his grandfather didn't just want to leave behind possessions. He wanted to leave a legacy. Thomas put his hand on her shoulder and said, "He knew you would do what was right. He always knew." And she replied with a sad smile, "Love is the only true testament." Weeks later, Clara returned to Labroum with determined steps. The mansion was covered in dust, but still breathed memories. In the corridors, the shadows seemed to whisper ancient names. She walked to the office and placed the will on the table. "Now, Grandpa, it's time to make good on what you believed in." Thomas joined her for the public reading of the document. Journalists and lawyers gathered, eager for headlines. But instead of numbers and inheritances, Clara read poetry and pain. He spoke of forgiveness, love, and redemption. Arthur Delmont left what money cannot buy. The last lines caused absolute silence. "If love is what survives us, then may my fortune serve to heal, not divide." Clara announced that part of the inheritance would be donated to nursing homes and shelters. Another part would create a fund for forgotten artists and dreamers. The mansion would now be a home for those the world had left behind. As she spoke, Clara noticed a presence at the door. Elise, aged and frail, watched with suppressed tears. The housekeeper walked over to her and knelt down silently. "I failed him, girl, but you honored him." Clara picked her up and replied, "He has already forgiven her, and so have I." Henry, imprisoned, watched the broadcast of the reading. The tears that fell were of loss and belated understanding. He finally understood that he had not been defeated. He had emptied himself. Everything he had sought was worthless without love, and deep down he wished he had had the courage to be like Clara. Outside, the sea roared with renewed force. The wind blew through the open windows like a blessing. The old portrait seemed to smile in the evening light. La Brume stopped being a symbol of loneliness and became a shelter. And Clara now was the guardian of Arthur's last lesson. Thomas watched everything from a distance, proud and excited. He wanted to see who would seek him out for love, he murmured. And he found what he was looking for, even if it was too late. Clara responded with a calm gaze, looking towards the horizon. Love never arrives late, Thomas. It just chooses the right moment. That night, Clara walked into the lamplit garden. The wind blew from the sea, bringing the sound of waves and memories. She lifted her face and said softly, "Rest easy, Grandpa. Love won." And for the first time, La Brume slept in peace. The rain fell again on La Brume as if time were closing a cycle. Clara watched from the window, feeling the weight of the calm before the change. Thomas hurried in, holding an envelope with the court seal. "Clara, the judge authorized the release of Arthur's recording." His voice mingled duty and reverence. On the recording, Arthur's voice sounded tired but steady as the ocean. "My name is Arthur Delmont, and this is my last testimony." The old man calmly narrated his own disappearance. He confessed that he had devised the plan to test his family's love. And he admitted with pain that the result was sadder than he expected. "My son Henry turned affection into calculation. But I still believe that the human heart can be redeemed." These words cut through the silence of the room. The reporters lowered their cameras, touched by the sincerity. It was a testament of the soul, not of possessions. When the recording ended, a second audio started. The sound was fainter, with background noises and irregular breathing. It was the final moment, the conversation between Arthur and Henry in the cabin. "Father, you don't understand. I deserve what's mine." And Arthur, before he quieted down, "Love was never possession, Henry. It was borrowed." The impact was immediate. The audience fell silent. The truth was not just about absence, but about humanity. Henry, in his cell, heard the broadcast on television. The tears that fell were a mixture of punishment and recognition. "He still called me son," he whispered, his voice breaking. That night, Clara walked to the lighthouse, the same one from her childhood. He carried with him the old tape recorder, now silent. When he arrived, he placed it on a rock and looked at the sea. "May your voice never be lost, Grandpa. Love is still here." And he pressed the play button, letting the wind spread the last words. As Arthur's voice mingled with the waves, the lighthouse blinked. The sound of the sea enveloped the phrases like an eternal song. Clara cried, but it was a calm cry of acceptance. That wasn't an end. It was an unmasked beginning. Love at last had withstood the severest test. Months passed, and La Brume rose from the ashes of tragedy. The corridors were filled with voices and laughter. Elderly people from different backgrounds found shelter and dignity under one roof. Clara walked among them as a guardian of memories. The mansion was no longer a monument to loneliness. It was now a home. On the main wall, Arthur's portrait had been restored, but something seemed more alive, a discreet smile, an attentive look. Clara swore that her grandfather's eyes followed her wherever she went. "He's not gone, he's just moved," he told visitors. And the echo of the waves seemed to confirm this every afternoon. Thomas Reed visited frequently, helping run the shelter. He and Clara created the Delmont Love and Hope Fund. Each donation restored dignity to those who had been forgotten. Arthur would have been proud of that, Thomas said. Clara replied with a firm look. He is proud. I can feel it. Meanwhile, Elise returned to the mansion for the first time since their goodbye. He entered silently, holding a bouquet of white lavender. He left the flowers under Arthur's portrait and knelt. Thank you for letting me see love, even though it was too late. Clara found her crying and hugged her silently. At the institution, Henry received occasional visits from a spiritual guide. He spoke little, read a lot, and wrote letters that he never sent. In one of them he wrote, "My father left, but he taught me how to live." And he kept the paper inside a book about forgiveness. The pain, little by little, turned into understanding. On the first anniversary of Arthur's departure, Clara organized a ceremony. All the residents gathered in front of the sea. Candles were lit and placed on small wooden rafts. The wind slowly pushed them towards the horizon, and each flame seemed to carry a memory of the old millionaire. As the last candle disappeared into the distance, the sky cleared. An arc of light appeared on the horizon, reflected in the calm water. Clara smiled, feeling a new peace. "See you later, Grandpa," he murmured. "Love goes on." And for the first time, the sea seemed to respond with a hug. In the following years, La Brume became a symbol of compassion. Schools, newspapers, and even museums told the story of Arthur Delmont, the man who disappeared not to escape, but to find love again. And his granddaughter Clara became the guardian of this legacy. Because love, after all, was the only inheritance that was never lost. The sun rose lazily over the sea, tinging the calm surface with gold. La Brume woke slowly, enveloped in the sounds of birds and tides. Clara walked through the newly blooming garden, where salt and perfume mingled. Each leaf, each flower, seemed to hold a fragment of the grandfather. The wind blew in from the ocean, and she swore she heard her name among the breezes. In the main room, on Arthur's old desk, there was something new. A sealed envelope, the family crest engraved in red wax. Clara recognized it immediately, the last promised letter. His hands trembled as he broke the seal, as if time were bending. Inside, a sheet with the firm and immortal handwriting of Arthur Delmont. If you are reading this, it is because you have learned what took me a while to understand. Love is not inherited, it is built, and it is not measured by time, but by surrender. You were the only one who loved me without expecting anything in return, and that saved me. Follow the waves, Clara. They know the way to the heart that loves. She held the letter to her chest, feeling the light weight of an eternal love. In the same envelope was a small antique compass and a map of the coast. On the back of the map, a simple note, "Where the sea kisses the cliffs, love begins again." Clara smiled. She knew exactly where it was, the place where he had delivered his grandfather's ashes a year before. He decided to go there, not to say goodbye, but to meet again. Upon arriving, the strong wind brought the smell of the sea. She walked to the edge of the cliffs, where the horizon seemed to breathe. He closed his eyes, letting the sound of the waves fill the silence. In his mind, he heard Arthur's voice, soft and confident. "Now you understand, my girl. Love never disappears. It changes shape." The tears came, but they were sweet, like rain on a flower. Each drop washed away the rest of the pain, leaving gratitude. The sea roared, not as an enemy, but as an old friend. Clara threw the compass into the water, watching it disappear beneath the waves, and he whispered, "Come back whenever you want, Grandpa. La Brume will always be your home." As the sun rose, a lone seagull crossed the sky. For an instant, the light on the waves formed a faint arc. Clara smiled, a sign perhaps, or nature responding. In any case, you get the message. Love is the only possible infinity. And with that thought, he returned home in peace. Back at the mansion, The residents were waiting for her in the garden. A little boy ran up to her with a flower in his hands. "It's from the sea," said the boy, handing him the wet, salty petal. Clara knelt down, laughed, and replied, "So the sea still remembers." The boy smiled, and in that smile she saw her grandfather's reflection. The mist breathed life, warmth, and humanity. Arthur's will was no longer a document, it was a way of life. The walls that had sheltered loneliness now held stories of new beginnings, and Clara, with teary eyes, understood the destiny she had inherited. It wasn't the money nor the name, it was the mission to teach love. At night, before going to sleep, he opened his grandfather's letter again. He remembered the words, "Follow the waves." He smiled, closed his eyes, and listened to the distant sound of the sea. In the echo of the waters, Arthur's voice seemed to whisper again, "Thank you for looking for me and for finding me, even after I was gone." And so, between sea, wind, and memory, the cycle closed in silence. Arthur Delmont had not disappeared. He had simply become eternity. Clara understood that true love is the only testament that time respects. And when the morning sun rose again over La Brume, it all started again. Because love, after all, doesn't die. It just changes address. 20 years have passed since the day Clara threw the compass into the sea. Time turned wrinkles into stories and longing into tenderness. La Brume still stood tall on the cliffs, firm against the wind and oblivion. Now, its open windows let in laughter and music. The mansion, which had once been a symbol of isolation, had become a beacon of humanity. Children ran through the once silent hallways, laughing loudly. The elderly, residents and former employees, shared tales of life and hope. On the walls, photographs of Arthur and Clara narrated the time in black and white. In the center of the hall, a bronze plaque read, "Here lies the love that survived absence." Clara, now with grey hair and a serene look, walked slowly through the gardens. The wind carried the same salty smell as always. Everyone still called her Madame Delmont, but she preferred another title. Keeper of the Tides, that's what those who knew her story called her. And that was what she had become, the keeper of a promise. On one of the stone benches lay Arthur's old recorder. Rusty but intact, it was turned on once a year in ceremony. That day, the sound of his voice echoed throughout the mansion, moving new listeners. If you are listening to this, it is because love has conquered fear. Some cried, others smiled silently. The Delmont Love and Hope Fund had already helped thousands of people. Hospitals, shelters, and schools bore Arthur's name on bronze plaques. But the real legacy was not material. It was moral. People started using the expression "doing a Delmont" to describe anonymous and selfless acts of love. One afternoon, a young reporter visited Clara for an interview. "Madame Delmont, what do you think your grandfather wanted to prove?" The sea was calm, mirroring the golden sky. She looked up and spoke as if talking to the wind. "Grandpa, love is still here. Your name lives on in the waves." And at that moment, a white seagull crossed the horizon, alone. Thomas Reed, now a slow-moving gentleman, sat down beside him. "You carried out his will better than any lawyer, Clara." She laughed softly. "I just loved him, Thomas. That's all." The man smiled, looking out to sea. And that's exactly what he wanted. They both fell silent, listening to the sound of the tides, the sound of eternity. As night fell, La Brume was lit up with dozens of lamps. Residents and visitors left flowers and notes in windows as a ritual. In each message, a thank you, a memory, a love rediscovered. The wind carried the petals to the sea, and the waves returned only peace. Love, after all, had kept its promise to never fade away. High on the hill, under the full moon, Arthur's portrait seemed to smile. Anyone who looked closely swore they saw his hand resting on Clara's shoulder. Maybe it was the light, maybe it was destiny, or love fulfilling its cycle. Because, in the end, the millionaire who disappeared didn't run away from life. It just hid inside her, until love found it. And so ends another story, one of those we don't hear but feel, maybe because deep down, everyone has had an Arthur Delmont in their life. Someone who just wanted to be remembered, not for what they had, but for what they loved. If this story touched you in any way, we invite you to continue reading. With each video, we relive emotions, discover secrets, and understand a little more about what moves people, love, time, and choices. So, if you want to see more stories like this, subscribe to the channel. It's simple, but it makes all the difference in getting new stories to you. And if this video made you think, leave a like, not as an automatic gesture, but as if silently saying, this story has stayed with me for a while. Now let your heart breathe and come with me to the next video. There's always another story waiting to be felt.